Hello, everyone. Welcome into another episode of Bowl Breakdowns here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. My name is Alex. As always, we are here to talk about the most recent Chargers game, which was a 19-17 loss to the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. I'm sure we're here under better circumstances, obviously, but Chargers season still intact for the most part when we talk about things like playoffs. So this wasn't, devastating loss, but when you have a chance to beat the Chiefs, you obviously want to, put the stake in Dracula's heart, so to speak. And the Chargers had their opportunities to beat the Chiefs tonight. And throughout the week, they're going to have to go back and look through the tape and look through the film and all that stuff and look at all the moments that went wrong, which we'll talk about. Seventh straight loss to the Chiefs, obviously not good, as Herbert looked like at his press conference when he was asked about it yesterday. So no one's happy, but we move on and we talk about the Chargers offense, defense, and special teams. First, I do want to talk about the Chargers' dreaded P word. I will talk about the playoff picture as it stands with now 4 games remaining in the season for the team in which they will play the Bucs, the Broncos, the Patriots, and the Raiders. Effectively, if you do look at the playoff picture, which I'll bring up now, the Chargers need to win essentially 2 games to get in. Their playoff probability is 89%, down from 94% after the Falcons win last week. And they do not have tiebreaker versus the Ravens. They do have the tiebreaker versus Denver, which obviously will matter in a couple of weeks when they rematch on Thursday Night Football, which will be a very big game for the Chargers, potentially the difference between them being the 6th or the 7th seed. So going to be a very, very important game. But I did want to bring that up, and I will bring it up at the beginning of every episode, regardless of the Chargers' results over the next couple of weeks, now that we are locked in as a wild card team. Or not locked in as a wild card team, sorry. Don't want to jinx them. We are locked in on having to make the playoffs to the wild card after the Chiefs clinched the AFC West last night. So that is something we'll keep tabs over. As of now, 89% playoff probability, down from 94. And the 5th seed is going to be tough to get because now the Ravens have tiebreaker. They run the bye this week, so the teams do have an identical record. So for the Chargers to get the 5th seed, they would have to finish 1 game over the Ravens. So it is looking more like they will be potentially the 6th or 7th seed, depending on what happens with that Denver game. The Colts and Dolphins, I believe, are 2 games back each at 6 and 7. So the Chargers effectively need to win 2 more games out of their last 4 to get into the playoffs. And it would have been nice to have that one last night and potentially clinch a playoff spot next week. But it wasn't meant to be. So the Chargers will have to rebound against the Bucs next week and then have a big game on that Thursday short week against the Broncos. But that's it for playoff picture discussion. I do think, again, like I said, it is important because where they get in the seeding determines who they play. And if you're the 5th seed, you're playing the Texans, and you probably feel pretty decent about that matchup versus if you're playing the Bills as the 7th seed and go on the road to Buffalo with Josh Allen looking like, the best quarterback in the league this year, to be quite frank. So let's get into the game now that we are done discussing playoff picture. I think for me, this game comes down to Jim Harbaugh. Now, I'm not going to blame him for the loss, but when I say that, I am talking about the decision-making that the Chargers took at various points in this game where, you have to play the Chiefs. You have to play, pretty much perfect to begin with. Let's be real. I do think that is the case. You have to play 4 consistent quarters of football. We'll talk about the offense later, who did not do that. But I think when you are this shorthanded as they are on offense, you have Ladd out, you have Dobbins out, you have, you're kind of skeletoning through the team together a little bit, in addition to the fact that talent-wise, the Chargers just don't stack up necessarily against the best of the AFC or the best of the NFC. Jim Harbaugh punts on what would have been a 56 or 57-yard field goal to tie the game at 3. in the first half. They crossed the 50-yard line again in the first half shortly after that field goal, and also elect to punt that away. And so, look, the teams that beat the Chiefs, I think, take the chances to beat the Chiefs, right? And the Chargers just didn't do that yesterday. Now, I'm not going to necessarily blame them for punting on the second one, but when you look at the end of the game and you lost by, 1 point, or, needed 2 more points, as Harbaugh said post game, that field goal decision becomes kind of killer, or not going for it, right? In those moments. And another moment that stuck out to me is that the Chargers did elect on 3rd and 16 on their final field goal drive to give the ball to Kamani Vidal for 5 yards and essentially make a 42-yard field goal, 37-yard field goal, which didn't change much for them in the macro. Dicker, I think, makes it either way, but they elect basically not to really try converting the 3rd and 16 through the air, which to me stuck out as a pretty questionable decision, because they had, some success with Palmer. They had some success with QJ in the first half. And, hey, if you don't pick it up through the air on 3rd down, I get it. It doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. But that was a confounding decision to me by both Roman and Harbaugh to just kind of play dead there, because the Chiefs have a whole 4.5 minutes left, if assuming you convert the field goal. And as we saw at the end of the game, Chargers did not get the ball back. And that is absolutely killer against the Chiefs. Now, if you go through the air and you don't convert 3rd and 16, or you can't even get it to, 4th and very, very short, maybe that doesn't change much in the grand scheme of the game. And I'm not, necessarily saying I bet on Quentin Johnston or Josh Palmer to convert that, but QJ did come up with that 3rd and 16 earlier in the game, where he held onto the ball after he was about to, I think it was Bolton who was about to, blow his head off. And then Josh Palmer came up with a couple 3rd, 4th down, clutch moments where he had to have it. So I was, not necessarily surprised, but a little bit disappointed that the Chargers just kind of elected to take the field goal with so much time remaining on the clock. And the distinct possibility that you play the Chiefs and they're going to score a field goal and have no time remaining, or when you do get the ball back, you're going to have like maybe a minute left and no timeouts. And so I thought that was kind of a misplay by the Chargers in that 3rd and 16 moment. And then you obviously talk about the first half, which I mentioned. You don't convert on that opportunity to get the field goal to Dicker, like I said, or to even give him the chance to take the field goal, and then punting again on 4th and 9. They got decent field position on one of those punts. One of the other punts netted 22 yards. So I don't know. I was a little bit confounded by the game management aspect of this game, where you have to be aggressive. You have to play four-quarter ball to be able to beat the Chiefs, and you have to play perfect. This is not, hey, let's hold a multiple touchdown lead against the Titans or the Browns or any of these teams. This is where Harbaugh's game management decisions matter, and I think you saw that by the end of the game. And when you, even for example, we'll get to Dicker in a second, when you take the field goal there and then Dicker does not hit the landing zone, and that results in a penalty in which the Chiefs end up starting the drive at the 40-yard line, that cost the defense another 15, 20 yards. And so now the Chiefs have to drive down even shorter than they had to before, with a whole 4 minutes left on the clock. So again, we'll talk about that in a second, but you just kind of have to play perfect and play aggressive ball when you are the less talented team going against the Chiefs, going against the Bills, going against the Lions, the Eagles, right? And that's not a diss on the Chargers roster, calling them, less talented. It is a matter of fact that the Chargers are building out this roster for, multiple years down the road. They're not there yet as a team. And so I didn't understand the Chargers playing it as conservatively as they did in those moments. I'm not saying they win the game if they take the Dicker field goal. I'm not saying, if this happened, then they win the game. But when I can point to essentially a handful of moments in which the Chargers didn't take advantage, in addition to, specific offensive and defensive moments, I thought they kind of played dead at times. And I didn't really like that decision by the coaching staff to just roll over and let the Chiefs have it. Unfortunate. And I think in the playoffs, should the Chargers get there again and be in a game against the Bills or be in a game against the Chiefs that turns into this grinded out defensive game that's like a, under, first team to 19, first team to 20 wins, you gotta be a little bit more aggressive with your opportunities, even when you do get Ladd McConkey back, even when you do get J.K. Thomas back. So that's just kind of my opinion there. Let's talk a little bit about special teams first. So obviously Dicker is not able to take a field goal, like I said, misses the landing zone, in which Harbaugh post-game said that was intentional. They did want to pin the Chiefs down by the goal line and have them inside their 20, 25. Misses the landing zone. They started their 40. So not a great special teams moment there. Darius Davis muffs a punt. And I think he also didn't catch one out of the end zone properly, but it just kind of rolled out of the end zone. So not a great punt return day. And there were a couple opportunities in which the Chiefs could have allowed a pretty decent punt return. Kind of a negligible J.K. Scott day, some good, some bad, punts as far as the day was concerned. But, overall, I didn't feel it was the best special teams day for the Chargers, especially, like I just said, when you have to play so perfect in the margins that, to beat a team like the Chiefs, to beat a team like the Bills, they just didn't have that edge on special teams today. And that was kind of unfortunate. Let's talk about the offense. I want to thread the needle on this because I don't want to, certainly come off as too negative or not appreciative of their effort in the second half. And the second half effort was legitimately great. QJ comes alive, has some big moments, and shout out to, as Chris Collinsworth highlighted on the broadcast, Scott Matlock and Tucker Fisk picking up some pretty good blocks that opened up some opportunities for the Chargers. So shout out to them. Gus Edwards and Kamani Vidal changed the game on that first touchdown drive for the Chargers, which pretty much got the party started for them, so to speak. And I think you saw that be like the first drive of the game where the run blocking, pass blocking really did improve from where it was in the first half. So shout out to those guys for sticking with it. I thought Kamani was great today. I thought Gus only averaged, I think, 3.6, but I thought he was actually pretty good in the second half, all things considered, and looked really lively once the offensive line kind of got their blocking together. Palmer obviously had a really great second half, and Herbert missed him on what should have been a touchdown. So he was good today. He came in his traditional Chiefs killer fashion. We've seen Palmer have some good games against the Chiefs, so shout out to him. And then, QJ had a good second half. Stone Smartt just came out of nowhere, and I think it's second in the team in receiving yards to Palmer. Steven has been one of the people who has been on the Stone Smartt fan club train this year. And after last night, you just have to go, hey, look, Hayden Hurst is injured. Will Disley comes off, and you have to play Stone Smartt. If Stone Smartt takes advantage of his opportunities, I think you have to lean into it, right? And so he had some nice catches, 4 catches, something like 70 yards last night. So good game for Stone Smartt as a whole, which I did not expect to be, one of the first things I said recording this show about the offense. But it's always kind of some this is the first game where I felt like you had like consistent, particularly in the second half, not the first half, consistent offensive contributors come from somewhere, especially after that Falcons game where it was just kind of McConkey soloing the whole time. So it was nice to see that, happen in the second half for the Chargers. All of that being said, you cannot go scoreless and have as many offensive drives stalled out as the Chargers did in the first half. And I'm happy that the blocking and the play calling and everything improved in the second. But you can't sit back in the second half and go, oh, the refs did it and all this shit that people post on Twitter when you have that much of a stinker first half against the Chiefs. I'm just gonna keep it real. You have to absolutely play better in the first half, and if you go to particularly Buffalo in the first round or Pittsburgh, any of these teams in the first round, and you put up 0 points in the first half on the road, more likely than not in a playoff game, you are getting buried. Some exceptions, obviously, in playoff history, the Chargers on the receiving end of one of those in Jacksonville. But there's a second half turnaround, and then there's just not playing consistent football, and we've seen this for the Chargers again and again. Being a good first half offense, but not a good second half offense. Being a good second half offense, but not a first half offense. We've seen this in several games this season. I don't need to go through and point out, which ones. you guys are smart enough to know which ones, and Greg Roman is smart enough to know which ones. But yeah, things just have to get started earlier, and I understand that with Ladd and Dobbins out, the easy offense isn't there, but they're not a team that can just kind of coast off of their second half or first half production. The Eagles are a bit of a notorious team for this season, but they never score on the first drive. They don't score in the first quarter, and then they have the skill players to make up for it in the final 3 quarters. The Chargers don't have that, just to be blunt and honest. And so that's why they just have to manufacture more in the run game early, more in the pass game early, obviously, but you got to get to some play action RPO looks and get some designer screens that look better and are better executed than what they have done, right? So I don't know. It's troubling to see the offense struggle as much for as big moments as they do, and part of that, is absolutely due to the lack of skill players. We can talk about that. This is not what this team is going to look like next year or 2 years from now. But if we're talking about games this year, I do think there are some non-roster considerations that the coaching staff and the offensive coaching staff, particularly Greg Roman and Marcus Brady, they just got to make things work a little easier than they are. And you see it when it does work, particularly in the second half, it's good, but you can't play 2 quarters at Arrowhead and win. So it has to be more consistent from the jump. And when it is more consistent from the jump, it has to be more consistent in the second half. So that's all there really is to say about the offense in this game. I did think the pass blocking, run blocking turned around in the second half, like I said. Not a great Trey Pipkins game, to be honest. Not a great Zion game either. Obviously, I would kind of need to watch the tape and all 22 to kind of really form concrete opinions there. But it's been a struggle kind of all season for those guys. Herbert, I think, was fine tonight. I think there were a couple moments where he was exceptional that got called back by dumb penalties on the Chargers offense. I thought for the third quarter and the beginning of the fourth quarter certainly was, starting to cook a little bit. Did miss the Palmer McDuffie ball where Palmer kind of, ran a really good round. McDuffie, Herbert throws it behind him. That was a pretty bad miss. And then obviously you talk about the Palmer walk-in touchdown he would have had if Herbert doesn't overshoot him. And this created a whole discourse on social media throughout the game of Palmer is slow. No, it was an overthrow. It's an overthrow. And I know Palmer is not Randy Moss, but in any sense of the word, I think Herbert would tell you that was an overthrow. And not just because he's being nice, he missed it. And Palmer ultimately runs a good route, as they showed on the replay afterwards. So, it was an up and down Herbert game. I did think, obviously the injury probably, rattled him a little bit. When he settled in, it was better. But yeah, because I think he had the ankle thing first, and then he had the leg contusion thing. Nothing listed as an official injury, to be clear, but just things that kind of rattled him during the game. So I did think once he settled in, he was good. But there have just been those moments, and we've seen it over the last couple of weeks. There have been some Herbert misses that I think he would like to have back over the last 4 or so weeks. Not necessarily including the Atlanta game, but the Bengals game had some big misses. The Ravens game did have some misses as well, and this game was no exception with the two particular plays that I mentioned. Again, it's not easy. No Lad, no JK. But I do think we expect a higher standard from Herbert than good. We expect great. And when you don't convert on the opportunities, you don't convert on the opportunities. Defensively, I thought this was a really, really good first half effort, in particular to kind of keep the game at being 13-0. I thought it could have been much, much worse if the defense did not step up and make some plays from Derwin, from Joey. Khalil was insane off the edge in this game. I did think the pass rush got a little, burnt out towards the end. That was only, I think they were going so hard for so long in trying to kind of have the offense get going that I do think pass rush did tire out. And, that's also been, a bit of a thing this season. I do think the second half pass rush has not had quite as much sustained success as the first half pass rush. But it was nice to see those guys have their respective moments. Derwin, again, I talked about him last week against the Falcons. I thought this was a really, really good Derwin game. So credit to him. He, was coming up in run support. He was coming up screaming off the edge. There was that moment where Pat Mahomes is like, Derwin's coming. And Derwin just, continues to run downhill, and the Chargers get a really good play off of that one. So that was, a great moment, great game from him as a whole. I thought the defensive line certainly, I would say the edge room in the first half, and I did think they kind of muscled up, at least against the run, a little bit in the second half. Not necessarily a complete effort from the defense when you look at some of the lapses that happened, particularly on that final drive where they had two chances to get off the field to Worthy on the 3rd and 10, and then had the Travis Kelce conversion, which effectively kind of ended the game. So it was not by no means a perfect game, but when you hold the Chiefs to 19 points, and similar to the first game, when you hold the Chiefs to 20 points, those are winnable games. And so I'm not saying by any means it was a perfect game from the defense that they pitched, but it was good enough to kind of win. And I do think the offense, special teams, and coaching mistakes, let them down in this one from, just the lack of consistency in the approach throughout the game. Trying to think of any other defensive takeaways I had. I didn't think this was the best Fulton game in the first half. He did tighten up in the second half. I did think it was better. Had a couple, boneheaded moments, penalties that I didn't think were great. I do think Fulton has come down a little bit from where he was earlier in the season. But, ultimately, I do think he's been pretty good on tape still. But got to clean up the penalties. Can't be having one or two every game. Because it does cost the team. And I know people try to argue the pass interference that they called on him, but when you're going into the defender's chest like this and you can't turn your head around, they're going to call it every time. So outside of that, I didn't have too many defensive thoughts. Cam Hart on the hit on DeAndre Hopkins that rattled the ball loose. DeAndre should have still come down with that, but what a play that saved a touchdown. It's unfortunate that we're not talking about that play in the context of a win. But I thought that was a really, really, really great moment from Cam Hart. So shout out to him for that. Tarheeb, I think, had a pretty good game by all standards and accounts. Just unfortunate that they weren't able to kind of rattle this together. And then when you talk about, needing to play perfect on defense to beat the Chiefs, Dion misses a tackle on that final drive, and then they give up the Kelsey conversion. They give up the Worthy conversion after they kind of play things perfectly. Some of that is, hey, Mahomes is Mahomes, but also when you have chances to get off the field on third down, you got to get off the field on third down. And you look at their Ravens loss and the Chiefs loss. The Ravens and the Chiefs were both 8 for 15 on third down in each of their wins over the Chargers. So I did think, not that that's the worst third down percentage of all time, but when you allow an elite team to convert over 50% of their third downs, more often than not, you are going to lose the game. So I did think, again, that's the third down defense, I think, has regressed a little bit from where it was at some of the high points this season. I think that's kind of about it for me today. If I had to give a Bolt Breakdowns MVP of the game, I actually didn't think about who I would give the MVP to. I'll give it to Stone Smartt. I thought Stone Smartt had a really great effort today. Came with some good catches. He gets the MVP. Some tough catches, tough moments to step up when Will Dissly went out of the game. They have no Hayden Hurst. So for him to step up, I thought that was a pretty cool thing for him to do, all things considered. And so I hope the Chargers lean into more of that over the next couple of weeks. So I think I gave it to Derwin last week. I gave it to Stone Smartt this week as your Bolt Breakdowns MVP of the game. Totally didn't forget that I have to do that segment. But that'll do it for me today, I guess. In the macro, I don't feel the worst about this win. I might have talked about it more negatively. I think I did a good job of balancing the line between positive and negative. But I do just think the difference between being a playoff team and being a contender is being perfect in those moments. And for all the shit that people talk about, Mahomes and the Chiefs and the refs, they're money when it matters. The Chiefs in particular and Mahomes, when it comes to defense, when it comes to offense, they do what they need to do. And I do think that is the difference between, having a Patriots-like dynasty. We saw them win games all the time like this. It's a difference between a team who's been there and done that versus a Chargers team that is still on the up and up, developing this first year in Harbaugh's system and Harbaugh's culture. And obviously, they're going to revamp the roster and all these things. But it is another, lesson for the team about what separates contenders from, pretenders. Not that the Chargers are pretenders. I do think they're a good team, but clear that they have a few more steps to go, both, again, from a roster building standpoint and also just from a bit, been there, done that moments standpoint, and knowing, how to come through in those final moments of the game. That's something that the championship level teams know how to do. So with the Patriots, like I said, for a number of years, we've seen it with the Chiefs, and everyone can complain about like Chiefs double magic if they want. Oh my God, it's bullshit how they win every week. The way they win every week is because they're good and they win every week. Now, winning as many one-score games as they do, unsustainable, I think, in the long term. And I think it's possible they could certainly get popped in a playoff game. But, at some point you just got to throw your hands up and go, they execute better than other people when it matters most. And Jim Harbaugh says, that quote, right? You at your best when your best was needed, right? And for all you can say about the Chiefs and for all you can talk shit about the Chiefs, they come through in those moments. So that's kind of my final takeaway from the game. Thank you guys as much as always for watching this episode of Bolt Breakdowns. We are going to have a chock full few weeks coming up on the show, because not only do we have the Bucs game next week, in which the Bolt Breakdowns will go up on Monday, but we also have 2 Bolt Breakdowns in 1 week because of the Denver game on Thursday night, which is actually the night before my final exam. So that's great. Hopefully I pass the semester before then. But you will get 2 episodes of Bolt Breakdowns on the Monday and the Friday following the conclusions of next week's game. So overall, disappointing loss, encouraging signs, and excited to see where this team goes forward. It's not all doomer. It's not all gloom. It's not all doom and gloom. They do have some room to grow. So I will see you guys on the next episode of Bowl Breakdowns. And as always, Bolt up.